Alright, Mr. Nintendo. We're not going to be doing much today. I'm just going to need you to take a look at these pictures and tell me how they make you feel. Does that sound alright with you? Don't want to be here. What is that shirt? Oh, it says, I heart copyright law. You like it? Pretty wrinkled, but I'm just a big fan of the concept as a whole. Okay, well, can I just show you these pictures now? I mean, I guess. Alright, here's the first one. How does this make you feel? Why are you showing me these? Just tell me how it makes you feel. Back! Get it away from me! Okay, wow. Let's just try another one. This one's even worse! How is this supposed to help me? These things are evil! You need to face your fears, okay? Try not to raise your voice, Mr. Nintendo. You are a sick man. Let's just do one more today, alright? Whatever. Okay, how does this make you feel? I'm getting my lawyers. What? Why? I'll see your ass in court.
Everybody, well, mostly everybody, loves emulation. It allows game systems to continue their life beyond their physical lifespan, gives players the ability to centralize all their games to one device, and also offers up countless settings and tweaks to make the gameplay experience even better than the original. They sound like a complete net positive, right? Well, Nintendo, among some other companies, doesn't seem to think so. In fact, their opinions on emulation lean very strongly in the direction of opposition. Essentially, they view emulation as an inherently evil concept that only promotes piracy and other illegal activity involving copyright infringement. However, if you even know the first thing about emulation, or you simply listen to what I just told you, it's obvious that is not what it is. So, why is Nintendo adamant about its negative position on emulation as a whole? Well, we can trace the origins of that all the way back to the inception of the most well-known rodent on Earth, surprisingly. Let's talk about it. Way back in the early 1900s, Walt Disney himself worked animating another character that wasn't a direct property of Disney, Oswald the Rabbit. However, after losing the rights to this character to another company, he was determined to gain exclusive rights to his own character. Obviously, this led to the creation of Mickey Mouse, and after his death, the Disney Corporation continued to push for copyright law reform, allowing longer periods for copyrights to be in effect before the property became public domain, which means it can freely be used by anyone with no legal repercussions. They managed to change copyright laws so much, in fact, that they extended the period of copyright from 25 years to an entire century in some countries, with most other countries not falling far behind that margin. This essentially means that most forms of media, including video games, will not become public domain until multiple generations have come and gone. Since this is a law, it obviously applied to other companies as well, who followed suit in enforcing the law that worked so well in their favor. I mean, why wouldn't they? It's essentially a law that allows them to win any lawsuit involving intellectual property instantly. They become bulletproof in that regard, and that's why it can be so dangerous to the general public. The biggest problem that arises with these laws in effect is the endangerment of game preservation, or media preservation in general. If the companies who own the intellectual properties do not make a conscious effort to preserve their creations of old, it is possible that the media will end up lost in the past, inaccessible by any person who wants to experience it in the future. This is a problem that is already painfully apparent with Nintendo. Now, from the outside looking in, you may think that this isn't the case. There's Nintendo Switch Online, which contains a considerably large collection of NES and SNES games to play as long as you have the online subscription. There was also the Virtual Console on previous Nintendo systems, in which they actually charged for the games individually. The Virtual Console had games ranging all the way from the NES to the Wii once it was all said and done. However, there's a sadder side to both of these options, as they don't offer up nearly enough to truly be considered a conservation library. Nintendo Switch Online's library of games, while it may seem quite large at first, is extremely limited, at least at the time of this recording. Sure, you've got a few classics, mainly the most popular games of the system, but even some of those are missing. For example, we still don't have Super Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Final Fantasy VI, and Secret of Mana, just to name a few. On the NES, it's not as bad, only missing a few notable titles like Duck Hunt and Yoshi's Cookie. However, it should be stressed that just because most of the bigger titles are on the service, it does not mean that this is an effort of complete preservation. There are still plenty of other games that didn't sell as many units, but are still loved and remembered by many people. Luckily, there are quite a few obscure games, or at least that I haven't heard of, included within the NSO library. I'm hoping they put these there because they genuinely feel that they matter, and not just in hopes it would make the library seem more expansive than it really is.
Man, this just isn't enough games. We gotta think of some more to add. Oh, I've got one. It's called Hey Punk, Are You Tough Enough? Master the moves to master me. You're telling me that's actually the title of a video game? Yes, look, I'm showing you right here. Put it in.
But, like I already mentioned, there's also the Virtual Console, which was the method of bringing older games to modern Nintendo consoles all the way up until the Wii U. Unlike Switch Online, these games were all sold separately. The downside of the Virtual Console, however, is even worse than Switch Online's. The Virtual Console almost exclusively included only the most popular titles on their respective systems. Smaller, more niche games rarely got the spotlight here, as it was likely they don't want the Virtual Console library convoluted with titles that not as many cared about. I should mention that there are a few outliers to this rule, but the general trend is that only the biggest games get Virtual Console spots. One advantage that Virtual Console does have over Switch Online is the sheer volume and range of titles available. Like I mentioned earlier, the games available range all the way from the NES to the Wii. However, the GameCube has never seen any Virtual Console releases, and has been left in the dust in general by Nintendo since the Wii for some reason. There are a grand total of over 300 titles available on Virtual Console, as opposed to the Switch Online's library not even hitting half of that. So the scenario becomes even worse now because it seems as if Nintendo is taking a step backward instead of forward in terms of game preservation when it comes to the Switch. One caveat should also be mentioned though. In some cases, it may even be impossible for a company to obtain the rights to a game, therefore completely preventing them from being able to preserve and distribute it. This can be the scenario for companies who created copyrights for their games, but the companies essentially no longer exist themselves. This is a very unfortunate scenario because no one can really do anything to obtain the rights to the property. This makes legally distributing these games nearly impossible even if they wanted to, so this may be the case with a small amount of titles, but obviously not all. A larger number of titles, however, possibly are being left with copyright holders because they simply don't want to give them up. It should be painfully obvious by now how protective some companies are over their intellectual property. And if they don't want their game preserved, they just won't allow a company to preserve it. Nintendo is no exception. Certain licensed games that you loved back in the day may not be obtainable by them because of these copyright problems. So, Nintendo isn't making the best effort at preserving their games. Why does this matter? Well, two things come to mind: inflated prices and lost media. At some point, if a clear, conscious, and wide-scale effort isn't made to preserve every game possible, one of those two scenarios will happen. Let's take a look at the former first. We've been seeing this happen for years now with older games that are either difficult or impossible to obtain and or play on modern hardware. Sites like eBay are the prime spot to jack up the price of your rare game and see who will fork out the cash for it. And don't get me wrong, it works. In fact, Nintendo's own seem to be the most popular type of game listed on the site. If there's a demand, people will supply, obviously. The bad thing about this though is that since these games are becoming so rare due to Nintendo's failure to offer them on newer consoles, the average consumer simply cannot afford to obtain them legally and play them on original hardware. At that point, their only option is to obtain a copy of a game through other means.
Not yet!
The other possibility is that of lost media. What if a game isn't popular enough to sell for thousands of dollars on eBay? Even worse, what if the console it sold on wasn't the most popular console of its time? The lower the popularity, the less likely the game is going to be talked about, sold, and even played. If the game and/or console sold considerably less units than their peers, then that also means that a lower quantity of that game is in circulation. Some video games are pushing 40 years old now, and eventually there will even be a very small amount of functioning hardware left for them to even be played on, simply because they've been lost to old age. Depending on the scenario, the likelihood of a game eventually becoming completely lost to time can get pretty high. This happens much more often with film than it does games, especially since the medium has been around even longer, but it is a threat nonetheless, and a considerably large one for more obscure games, who still deserve to be preserved just as much as the others. So, what's the solution to this problem? Well, the same thing I've been repeatedly saying that is absent from Nintendo platforms this entire time. A comprehensive, or almost comprehensive, library of all games from previous Nintendo systems. Now, I know that request is completely irrational, and I do not expect it to actually happen, at least not anytime soon. But, that still doesn't change the fact that most of these games are getting stuck on their original consoles, with no way to play them if you don't want to fork out the sometimes absurd amounts of cash to obtain them legally. So, with that said, you would think the solution to this problem is impossible, right? Well, no, and that is where emulation comes into the picture. Otherwise known as the ability to play games on a device different from the original or intended hardware. Whether it be a personal computer, mobile phone, or even another game system, emulation is extremely versatile, and, like I said, enables games to be kept alive far beyond their original shelf life. Additionally, many emulators have options to enable higher resolutions, higher frame rates, custom textures, and even mods, allowing you to experience the older games in even higher quality than the original hardware. So, why does Nintendo hate them? Well, they don't. Maybe. I'm not really sure. Take a look at this. On the Australian domain of Nintendo's website, they have a legal section outlining some common questions about intellectual property, copyright, and the use of their emulators outside of their intended mediums. One area outlines their opinions on the concept of emulators, with part of it saying, "A Nintendo emulator allows for Nintendo console-based or arcade games to be played on unauthorized hardware. The video games are obtained by downloading illegally copied software, i.e. Nintendo ROMs, from internet distributors. Nintendo ROMs then work with the Nintendo emulator to enable gameplay on unauthorized hardware such as a personal computer, a modified console, or another video game device." This statement, because of the way they phrase it, gives off the impression that even the concept of an emulator is against the law. They essentially imply that the only way to obtain copies of the games to play on an emulator is to download them illegally from the internet. However, both of these statements are completely false. Emulators, as a standalone program, are completely legal, as long as they can run without the presence of the BIOS of their respective system, which is essentially the code that boots the system up. If they function without that, they are fully safe. Additionally, the copies of the games, more commonly known as ROMs, are also completely legal as long as they are obtained by ripping the ROM from your own copy of the game using your own system. So, the wording that Nintendo uses on this legal section of their site is bordering very closely on categorically false and is obviously an attempt at fear-mongering toward the consumer.
Okay, welcome back, Mr. Nintendo. I am glad we were able to get that situation sorted out and not get the law involved. Did you know I really don't like you? Wait, are you still wearing the same shirt? Oh, I have more than one. Why did you bring the other one? In case you asked me about it. Still pretty wrinkled. So what are we doing today? Well, today we are going to be talking about your thoughts on emulation. And we're not going to be using the pictures this time, so you don't have to worry. It's illegal. No, it isn't. Hey man, it's just my opinion. No, it's not an opinion. It's literally just wrong, Mr. Nintendo. No, it's illegal. Why do you think it's illegal? Because I don't like it. Oh my god. You know what I do like though? What? Copyright law.
But here's the thing, Nintendo uses emulation themselves, a lot. every game on Virtual Console was emulated. Every game in the NES and SNES Switch Online library is emulated. 2 out of 3 of the games in the very recently released and then unreleased Super Mario 3D All-Stars are emulated. Additionally, they released 2 entirely separate products, the NES and SNES Classic Edition, that were literally just pretty looking emulation machines. They obviously see the value in emulation, so why do they seem to hate it so much when others utilize it?
You can come out now.
Oh, my head.
Piracy is obviously the main concern cited by that same legal section on the Nintendo website. They even go as far as to reference and maybe even brag about their quote-unquote aggressive worldwide campaign to stop the production and distribution of pirated video game products. They view it as a very serious problem. But what if I told you that the reason this problem exists all boils down to the actions, or lack thereof, of Nintendo themselves? As I mentioned earlier, Nintendo's library of legacy titles is extremely limited. Many games from previous eras have not seen a re-release in any fashion since their initial one. So, the only way to play this game, other than the original hardware, would be either to find a physical copy of the game online, buy it, wait for it to ship to you, buy a game dumper, which is sometimes really expensive, buy the system the game was originally on if you don't already have it, put the game into the game dumper, connect it to your computer, dump the game, move the game to your computer, open the emulator, and play the game. Or you could just go online and download the game illegally off of a ROM website. Surprisingly enough though, in the case of older games, neither of those options benefit or hurt the original developer. Let me explain. Now, the main reason for being anti-piracy is that it takes money away from the original developers of the game, and that is a very valid reason, in some scenarios, especially if the game is fairly new and on a current gen system. However, let's take the scenario I just mentioned when there's a game that was on an old system that may be either very difficult to find or unreasonably expensive. Let's also say that the game and/or system is not being produced by the original manufacturer anymore, so your only option is to buy secondhand. And finally, this game has never been re-released, ported, or remade in any fashion. If, hypothetically, someone were to pirate that game and emulate it, the company who made the game does not lose money in any fashion, whether indirectly or directly. The only person you could say even loses out on some money is the secondhand reseller of the game. This seemingly specific scenario is actually the case for many games across many systems, and it doesn't exclude the classics either. There are quite a few of those that fall into this criteria as well. So what's the argument at that point? Well, obviously, it's still illegal, and Nintendo seems to love enforcing the law just because they can, and that seems to be the most hypocritical thing about this entire situation. The vast majority of people don't pirate games because they don't want to pay for them. They pirate games because companies won't give them a way to pay for them. This isn't just something I made up either. Ever since the rise of digital storefronts like Steam, allowing developers to easily centralize all their games, new and old, into one convenient service, piracy rates on PC have seen a significant drop. Now, I know this will never happen, but what if Nintendo started putting their games up on Steam, either in packs or individually? I guarantee you they would sell like mad. I know many people, including myself, that would kill to have convenient and legal access to these games, let alone on PC, but in general. Oh, and one more thing. Let's go back to Nintendo's legal section of their website one last time. In the FAQ section of the page, there's a question referencing the benefits of emulation for game preservation, mentioning that it doesn't hurt anyone and allows gamers to play old favorites. Their answer is so hilarious and childish that I have to read the entire thing. The problem is that it's illegal. Copyrights and trademarks of games are corporate assets. If these vintage titles are available far and wide, it undermines the value of this intellectual property and adversely affects the right owner. In addition, the assumption that the games involved are vintage or nostalgia games is incorrect. Nintendo is famous for bringing back to life its popular characters for its newer systems. For example, Mario and Donkey Kong have enjoyed their adventures on all Nintendo platforms, going from coin-op machines to our latest hardware platforms. As a copyright owner and creator of such famous characters, only Nintendo has the right to benefit from such valuable assets. Let's pick this apart, shall we? They mention that games being referred to as vintage or nostalgia games is a false statement, immediately after referring to them as vintage in the previous sentence. After that, they follow it up stating that they are famous for bringing their popular characters back to life by bringing them to newer systems. Well, I hate to break it to you, Nintendo, but making a game featuring the character people are nostalgic for doesn't count as game preservation. I'm not sure how you came to that conclusion. But if that's not what you meant and you were trying to say you bring classic games to newer consoles, then sure, you're kind of right, but like I said earlier, just bringing the most popular titles back only solves a fraction of the problem. Your answer to this question completely ignores anything other than the most popular properties and titles. Also, why did they feel the need to mention that only they have the right to benefit from such valuable assets? What do you mean by benefit? It's not like ROM sites are literally charging people for downloads. That statement is completely irrelevant to the original question. Either way, at the end of the day, actual pirates are still going to exist, and they quite literally will never go away. Some people are just that cheap, but they are vastly outnumbered by people who genuinely want to support the developers of their favorite games, who are also real people, just as a reminder. Just like with many things, the bad apples of the group get viewed as the majority because of the bad stigma around them, even though they are actually a very small minority of the total representation of the group. I've already mentioned how much Nintendo likes to use the law to their advantage, but let's talk about some of the specific lawsuits relating to emulation and ROM sharing that have happened fairly recently. First off, let's go back to August of 2018. In the first week of this month, Nintendo sued two considerably large ROM sharing and emulation sites known as Love Retro and Love ROMs, which both came from the same host. These sites hosted hundreds of Nintendo ROMs and also allowed some of them to be played in the browser. Additionally, they even included downloads for the BIOS of certain consoles, which, as I mentioned earlier, can make certain emulators run much better. These are the illegal emulators, just to reiterate. The original amount Love ROMs was sued for was $2 million for illegal use of every trademark, plus $150,000 for each Nintendo game hosted on their site. In total, that amount ends up being over $100 million in the case of Love ROMs, an absolutely absurd number for a small site like that, which was actually only run by 2 people from what I understand. Obviously, Nintendo wasn't able to get away with that much money, but when it was all said and done, they managed to take $12 million from these people, all for offering downloads of games that they don't even sell anymore.
Please, don't take anything else. I am begging you. I am in $18,000 of credit card debt. My landlord is kicking me out and my wife left me. Shouldn't have uploaded All-Star Cheer Squad to the internet then.
And yes, I am fully aware that Nintendo is well within their legal right to do this, but that's not my point. My point is that most of the ROMs offered on that site could not be easily obtained anywhere else, and instead of offering them themselves, Nintendo decided to sue these people for every dollar they'll probably ever earn in their life. But anyways, very similar lawsuits for other ROM sites also closely followed this one, with Nintendo's latest rampage of takedowns ending around late 2019. It's inevitable that more will come soon, but the question remains of when. And yes, I will admit offering downloads for console BIOS was just a bad idea from the start. I really don't think they should have done that, as you can find an emulator for the majority of consoles that doesn't require a BIOS to function. Also, it probably wasn't the best idea to allow the ROMs to be played directly in the browser because of how easily accessible that is. Those two things are probably what got them targeted so heavily by Nintendo. However, other than that, this was just a site hosting ROMs for the purpose of preservation and easy access that Nintendo didn't offer themselves.
Okay, Mr. Nintendo. We need to have a serious talk. Is it about copyright law? Because I love that stuff. Actually, yes. The whole reason you came here to Chapps & Associates was to get help with your problem of abusing copyright law. I do not have a problem. It's the law, and I get to use it. I don't even want to be here, yet somehow it gets put on my schedule every week. Yeah, I wouldn't question that. What? Anyways, let's get back on topic. It just seems like we aren't making enough progress in each session. I'm gonna need you to start cooperating with me more. No, shut up. Why am I here? I don't schedule these appointments. The only reason I show up is because it gets labeled as meeting on my calendar. Yet somehow you managed to lure me in here anyway. Just don't worry about it. I'm sure someone's just mixing some things up. Okay, I don't believe a word out of your mouth. I'm getting my lawyers. Oh, no you aren't. You signed the agreement, remember? Do you have any idea what I do with people like you? Nothing, since you signed the agreement. I am out of here. Mr. Nintendo, I wouldn't do that. Eat
This isn't just an issue with legality, it's an issue with morality. In my opinion, and many others, Nintendo is not doing the right thing here, and I'm specifically referring to taking down sites hosting older ROMs from, let's say, at least 3 generations ago. Just for the record, if you pirate Switch games or any other readily available type of game, I do not support your decision and you are hurting people's livelihoods. But back to my point. If a game is that old and you aren't offering it with easy accessibility on your current platforms, then you gain absolutely nothing by suing the people distributing it other than the money you tear out of their hands. That small profit is nothing compared to the absence of game accessibility and horrible PR that Nintendo receives for being so ruthless. I understand that they are a business and their goal is to protect their properties to keep making money. However, like I said before, literally zero money is lost if they aren't offering the games themselves. So who's really at fault here? One company, however, in my opinion, does game preservation right. Say hello to Sega, the creator of your favorite blue hedgehog. They've opted to take on a much more relaxed attitude when it comes to emulation, and have made significantly more efforts than Nintendo to keep their games alive far past their original lifespan. Sega has the large majority of their games from all generations up for sale on Steam, and for the older games on the Genesis and Mega Drive, they have quite literally developed an official emulator for them. Let's just take a look at the intro that plays when you boot this thing up. Even on top of that, this isn't just your average emulator. The main hub for booting up games takes place in a virtual bedroom. Inside here, you can choose from your collection of games, change various emulator settings, modify inputs, enable online multiplayer, change the time of day inside the room, modify audio settings, view achievements for the games, and even play preset challenge scenarios inside quite a few of the games that test your skills. Heck, you could even just stare at the TV static if you really wanted to.
This game blows!
Even further, Steam Workshop content is enabled as well, meaning you can literally download and play mods of the games you purchase. Now, you're probably thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. I bet it costs a ton of money though. Wrong. I got the emulator along with 58 games for $7.72 USD. 58 games for under $10 on an official emulator that is leagues better than any of Nintendo's poor excuses for emulation. Now, I'm not saying that Nintendo should be charging this little if they ever made an official emulator. If they did the same thing with the same quantity of games, I'd honestly be willing to pay quite a bit more, especially if DLC was available that added even more games. However, the only thing that ever came close to this was the NES and SNES Classic, which were entirely separate pieces of hardware sold at extremely inflated prices that didn't include nearly as many games as Sega's emulation package did. What Sega is doing here is far more than just selling their older games on a different platform. They are preserving history, centralizing their properties for easy access, and most importantly, keeping the legacy alive for future generations. More people get to know about these games and enjoy them for themselves, and pre-established fans of the games get to relive the great memories they had when originally playing the titles. It's crazy how Nintendo continues to wonder why so many people are downloading ROMs off of unauthorized sites, well, simply because they have no other option, all while they continue to attack them to the fullest extent of the law, without simply taking a step back and realizing how easily they could prevent the majority of the illegal activity. And it's obviously not just some hypothetical theory either. A company has already done it, with great success and resounding praise from fans of their games. All Nintendo is doing with these aggressive legal campaigns is pushing their loyal fans away. And most of them, including myself, still love their games so much that we continue to hold on to the thread of a possibility that one day, just maybe, in the far future, they will finally come to their senses.
Alright. Got your food for the day right here. For the day? What do I look like to you, a f***ing squirrel? I need more than this. I am holding you hostage in a remote location and could end your life at a moment's notice, and you want to sit there and complain about how much food you're getting? You must be stupid. Yeah, that's what I thought. You know what you're doing to me is extremely illegal. Way more so than any of that emulation crap we were arguing about. Do not say that word around me ever again. That is the whole reason you are here. People like you aren't needed in this world. I'd like to know the whole reason that damn shirt is still wrinkled. You really are stupid, aren't you? You know what? You want to act like that, you can eat nothing for today. Give me that. No, wait. See you tomorrow, dumbass. Damn it.
Over the years, and especially more recently, Nintendo has opted to take part in some business practices that weren't exactly accepted by the general public. The backlash towards the company for their decisions has become even more painfully apparent in the past couple years, as the practices themselves have seemingly become substantially more frequent. The reason that this is the case is up for debate, but everyone has their theories, including myself. For now though, it's best we get a better understanding of all the questionable decisions they've made so far, and why people got so angry about them in the first place. Let's talk about it. Now, when the topic of Nintendo doing quote-unquote bad stuff comes up, I often hear the word anti-consumerism being thrown around quite a bit. So much in fact that I feel the word itself has lost its actual meaning. Anti-consumer, as an adjective, is defined as improperly favoring the interests of businesses over the interests of consumers. In the case of quite a few of the presumably non-respectable things Nintendo has done, this term isn't the most fitting one to use. Of course, it is a much more fitting term to use in some cases compared to others, but even that can be left up to the wonders of subjectivity. However, I personally think that the term consumer neglect is a much better blanket statement that covers more scenarios when it comes to Nintendo's malpractices. Neglect, in some contexts, can be defined as giving little attention or respect to, or to disregard, and I think this is a far more fitting description of what they are doing. Many things, like the complaints from their fans who also happen to be consumers, are disregarded, with little to no explanation as to why, and almost zero transparency to the actual thought process of the company itself. It's no wonder the fans get so angry at Nintendo, because oftentimes it seems like we are voicing our complaints inside of an echo chamber. I'm almost positive they are aware of most of the complaints we have, but choose to ignore them because, well, usually everyone will just buy the product anyway. The question is, can you blame the consumer for this? Not necessarily. It is the company's responsibility to create the best product possible, but the consumers also have the power to voice their complaints with a product by simply not buying it.
This shit sucks! But it has Mario in it. You know, you're right. You know me too well, you little rascal.
However, this is, in my opinion, an unrealistic request of consumers as a whole. First of all, the consumer base of Nintendo fans is so large, spanning all ages and locations, that it is virtually impossible to influence anywhere close to the majority of them to boycott a product. Not to mention the fact that some fans just don't care about the presumably bad thing that Nintendo is doing. Everyone assigns their own value to a product, and if it seems worth it to them, they'll gladly pay for it. That's the dilemma being faced here. Nintendo does something that people don't like, tons of people buy their products anyway, the cycle continues. If you are a Nintendo fan, it is however almost certain that at least one of these business decisions has either affected you directly, or at least caused you to think of Nintendo under a slightly more negative light. I could sit and argue semantics and theorize about the mind of a Nintendo fan all day long, but that obviously won't solve anything, so let's actually talk about these specific scenarios in depth and at least attempt to look at them with an objective and critical eye.
No thanks. I'll just keep writing angry comments on their Twitter and act like it makes a difference. Yep. They're gonna listen to this one.
Inevitably, I've actually already covered a few of the instances of consumer neglect coming from Nintendo before, because the topics were extensive enough to warrant their own full-length discussion. Regardless, for the sake of comprehensiveness, I'm going to briefly discuss them here as well. First off, we have limited releases.
I am tired of saying those words. No, I am not!
As much as this topic has been run into the ground, it's still worth mentioning in the context of this conversation. The abnormal and sudden adoption of the limited release model by Nintendo for a consecutive string of random titles baffled many fans and angered even more. The main terms used by many of these fans when describing the issue with limited releases were usually artificial exclusivity or artificial demand. Limited releases purposefully keep the game on the shelf for a shorter time period than normal, most of the time only officially selling the game for less than a year. In some instances, limited releases can actually be a great idea for all parties involved. For example, let's say there was an indie game for the Switch that was already on the eShop and was doing really well. So well, in fact, that the studio was interested in doing a physical release of the game. However, they do not have enough funding to continuously meet the demand and supply the physical copies for the foreseeable and indefinite future, simply because they're still a considerably small studio. So, they decided to do a limited release of their game, only producing copies for a limited window of time to provide physical versions of their game for fans who are interested, while avoiding the exacerbation of too much money due to high and persistent production costs. In this scenario, a limited release sounds like a great idea and the best solution possible considering the circumstances. Even further, there are companies who help people with this exact issue get their game out in physical form.
What's that? They did that exact thing with a collection of some of the most popular Mario games of all time? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they took it off the eShop too? Are you hearing this shit?
Yes, as most people already know, Super Mario 3D All-Stars, a collection of the games Super Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy, was only available both digitally and physically from September 18th, 2020 to March 31st, 2021. This one in particular seems to be the most popular limited release controversy because of the sheer popularity of Mario. A limited release for this game, especially in digital form, was very obviously an attempt to induce buyer's remorse or FOMO. There was no reason to release the game in this fashion other than as an attempt to artificially inflate the revenue for the product within a very short window of time. Which they did, don't get me wrong, but to me it seems scummy to do that, especially with something as popular as Mario. There are plenty of reasons and scenarios a person would not be able to purchase the game within that window even if they wanted to. And even if the issue was that Nintendo didn't want to pay to keep producing cartridges for the game, I am sure that hosting the game on the eShop is not expensive at all, especially for the additional profits that would continue to show after the physical release's end date. A similar but arguably worse scenario happened around the same time with the re-release of the first Fire Emblem game on the Switch for its 30th anniversary. This port came out in December and was only available until March 31st. But for this one, the title was announced exclusively as a digital release, meaning that the game was literally impossible to purchase even secondhand after the deadline had passed. To add salt to the wound, this was the very first time the game has officially been localized in English and sold in the United States. So at this point in time, you cannot play the first Fire Emblem game under official English translation unless you bought it during that initial window.
Alright, looks like I just have one more question for you. Sure. Have you spoken English between December of 2020 and March of 2021? Actually, no, I just learned English this past June. Yeah, you aren't playing this game. But why does that matter? Get out!
Nintendo's reasoning, when prompted by the press about these releases, stated that the limited release windows were meant to celebrate the respective game's anniversary, and that once the anniversary period they set was over, the celebration was over. At least to me, this reasoning seems like it may even be some sort of corporate PR cover-up for the original speculation I mentioned earlier, and that it really was a scheme to just make as much money as possible. Nintendo's fiscal year also happens to conveniently end on March 31st, meaning they will be reporting all of that sweet limited release revenue to their shareholders the very next day after. If you were to tell me that a games company was celebrating the anniversary of one of its most popular characters for a limited time, I would just think they changed their Twitter profile picture for a week and called it good. Not try to completely wipe availability for a game celebrating the anniversary that would do completely fine outside of the context of it anyway. Just for the record, they did change their Twitter profile picture though. However, surprisingly enough, at least where I live, I actually still see physical copies of 3D All-Stars collecting dust on quite a few store shelves. Nintendo actually states on the official website for the game that this is because the physical release is meant to remain on store shelves while supplies last. It's actually quite surprising how there are still copies of the game left to be sold after this long though. The game sold like mad during its official release window, so the probability of them overshooting the sales estimates by that big of a margin is pretty unlikely in my eyes. Then again, I'm probably reading way too far into it and starting to sound like some crazy conspiracy theorist. Either way, the digital version of the game is and has been unobtainable since the end of March 2021. Another thing that I've already covered in detail is Joy-Con drift. Joy-Con drift is an extremely common problem in Nintendo Switch controllers that causes them to behave abnormally, most commonly sending incorrect inputs to the console, such as moving the analog stick in a direction the player didn't even press, or in some cases even sending an analog stick input to the console that was never entered in the first place, causing things like the player moving without the controller even being touched. The issue was discovered and first made known shortly after the Switch's initial release, and directed a lot of negative attention towards Nintendo for obvious reasons. There was a blatant defect with their product that a considerable amount of people were experiencing, and consumers are still angry about it to this day. Why is that, you ask? Well, as far as people know, Nintendo never fixed the problem. Joy-Cons around the world are still drifting to this day, and it's been over 4 years since the problem first became apparent. Nintendo does happen to offer repairs of the controllers now if you send the Joy-Cons into them, but that means you're basically giving them up for at least 3 weeks, and the fix may not even be permanent. They actually originally charged for these repairs as well, meaning you had to pay money to fix a defect that they were well aware of and essentially refused to fix themselves on the production side. Most people nowadays are just so tired of trying to fix or deal with the annoyances of drift that they aren't even using the Joy-Cons themselves at all anymore.
I'm still using mine to level out my desk.
There have also been multiple private and class action lawsuits filed against Nintendo relating to Joy-Con drift, but unfortunately none of them have brought about any real change. Towards the beginning of the Switch's lifespan, when drift was first becoming apparent, Nintendo did put out a statement urging consumers to visit their support website if they were having any issues with their controllers, essentially acknowledging that drift was a real problem and that they would fix it. However, in their responses to lawsuits, they took a very different approach, and it goes to show how much of a fake corporate face they put on sometimes. In response to one of the class action lawsuits filed against them relating to this issue, they argued that Joy-Con drift, quote, isn't a real problem or hasn't caused anyone any inconvenience. Basically, they were using the deny method, something common in legal practices when a big company does something really f***ing stupid and doesn't want to have to deal with cleaning up after themselves. But let me dial back my frustration for a minute here, because very recently people have begun to notice that some Joy-Cons are coming with a fix for drift right out of the box. The fix simply includes putting 2 thin strips of foam behind the joystick module. This fix was already being used by consumers themselves beforehand, but that obviously involves opening up the controller, which most people aren't comfortable doing. The added foam seems to solve the problem, and others even reported a small piece of cardboard achieving the same result. However, in most cases, this fix is not permanent, especially with Nintendo's solution. Because of how thin the foam strips are, after enough use they can wear down all the way back to the plastic, essentially voiding the Joy-Con of the fix and opening it back up to drift once again. What's even more strange about this is the fact that not every single new set of Joy-Cons being shipped today includes the fix. Some people are reporting the foam strips in their pair of Zelda Skyward Sword HD exclusive Joy-Cons, but others are not. It's honestly very confusing why only some of them are receiving this treatment, and even more baffling is the fact that instead of attempting to prevent Joy-Con drift at a fundamental hardware and manufacturing level, they instead opt for a cheap and easy fix that fans were using well before them.
Alright, let's see what we got for this one.
The final thing I've already discussed before, but not nearly as in-depth as the others, is the Nintendo Switch Online service, also commonly referred to as NSO. I think it's safe to say that the online experience in the vast majority of Nintendo Switch games is, less than ideal. For starters, most real-time online matches in quite a few games are unbearably laggy, way more often than not. I don't know about you, but I personally don't like playing my online games in Microsoft PowerPoint mode.
And on this next slide, the golf ball rolled a little further.
Some games run much better when playing online than others, and I can only guess that has something to do with how each game's online play infrastructure is designed. But even in the most reliable online games like Splatoon 2 or Mario Kart 8, I still receive random spurts of lag and connection errors that kick me out of matches quite often. Most famously, Super Mario Maker 2's online multiplayer modes are extremely laggy, especially at the lower versus ranks. It seems that lag becomes less prominent in the higher ranks of the game, presumably because anyone playing up there has a fairly decent internet connection and pushed through the pools of players with horrible internet to get to the top. That's the exact problem with most of these games though. The network is designed in a way so that if one person has shitty internet, the entire match suffers, making them lag just as much as the person with the dollar store internet connection that they're playing with. Either way, I've even had experiences where I was playing with people who I knew all had a decent connection, but still experienced large amounts of lag just because of how bad the service is in general. As of right now, Nintendo Switch Online is only $20 USD per year, or $3.99 USD a month if you want to pay monthly. Compared to the other online services from competing consoles, this is extremely cheap, more than half the price essentially. It's very possible that this very cheap subscription price is what's holding the company back from improving the network infrastructure. Obviously, a potential solution could be to increase the price of the service in order to pull in more funding for improving online play specifically. However, since they've already settled on the price, especially for this long, increasing it at this point would cause a very obvious amount of controversy. A better solution, in my opinion, would be to offer some sort of premium tier membership for NSO. This tier could cost a few more dollars per month and the original price would stay the same for the lower tier. The benefit of buying the premium tier would be access to the library of Nintendo 64 and Game Boy Advance games similar to the already existing NES and SNES online libraries. Nintendo could then use the extra revenue gained from the premium memberships, put it back into improving the online play, and both sides benefit. The people who still want to pay for the base membership starting at $3.99 a month will receive better online play, and the people who pay for the premium membership get more legacy content. Speaking of legacy content, let's also talk about the current situation with that on the Switch as well. So far, the only legacy games available on the Switch are the titles offered through the NES and SNES online service, and a small number of ports such as Super Mario 3D All-Stars and other games ported by second or third-party developers. The Virtual Console, which was present on the past 2 entire generations of Nintendo consoles, both portable and home, is nowhere to be found. The library of games on Virtual Console across all of these systems totaled over 600 titles by the end of all of their lifetimes, with over half of that being available on the Wii U alone. All of that legacy content is essentially flushed down the drain since we've moved on to the next generation. More than 90% of those games are no longer playable on the Switch, not to mention the fact that the library we do have now on NSO was drip-fed to us at a snail's pace over the past 4 years. The reason I'm mentioning this again has nothing to do with emulation like I discussed before. It's the fact that so many people are willing to pay for content that is extremely cheap, easy, and profitable to put out on the Switch, but even after over 4 years it still hasn't happened. It's nice to have this many NES and SNES titles available to us for only $20 a year, but it feels like nothing in comparison to what the past consoles did. Even if they did charge for some of the legacy content instead of just including it in NSO, I'm sure most people would gladly pay. It's honestly hard to say this is a huge deal, but I know a very large amount of people that would really appreciate more legacy content on the Switch. And obviously, the issue of game preservation is always something to worry about. Good evening and welcome to Channel 12.5 News. I'm your host, Hank R. Mann. Let's get right into tonight's stories.
There's only one camera!
Oh, right. It has now been 2 weeks since the disappearance of local acclaimed therapist Dr. Edward Chapps. Authorities allege Chapps may have been kidnapped from within his own office and taken to a remote location. He was last seen by his receptionist beginning a weekly appointment with one of his patients, who has yet to be publicly identified as to protect their privacy. The search for Dr. Chapps, or his corpse, continues as we speak, and police urge that anyone with any information that may lead to his whereabouts contact the number on your screen now. Oh, this just in, we've received word that our field team has managed to gain press access to the crime scene. Not sure how they managed that, but let's take it over to Darcy for more information. F***ing hate this job, man.
Thanks, Hank. I'm here on the scene of Dr. Chapps' alleged kidnapping, where police are diligently inspecting all that can be inspected. Oh, that looks like one of the lead detectives right over there. Let's go see what he has to say. Excuse me, sir.
How the hell did you get in here?
Darcy James, Channel 12.5 News. The viewers just have one question. How do you know that Dr. Chapps was kidnapped?
Well, we noticed his chair fell over.
Let's get a panning shot of that. Anything else?
No.
The final problem that is apparent with Switch Online, and probably the smallest, is the lack of social functionality on the console. Features such as player-to-player messaging, inviting friends to games in many titles, as well as things like player parties and game-specific communities or messaging boards are all missing from the service. But because the main target audience of the Switch skewing younger than other consoles, I don't see that much of a problem with this, and I think Nintendo wants to prevent any cases of targeted harassment or bullying on their platform for this exact reason. Especially after the absolute meme fest that was Miiverse. Don't get me wrong, I loved it and I'm all for a social network for the Switch, but the reasons I gave are probably why they haven't done anything like that ever since. Either way, an easy solution to that would be as simple as having a parental control option that prevents online social interaction on the device when enabled. The severity of each quote-unquote offense that Nintendo has been involved with varies widely, and I'm sure that was obvious, but let's start off with the one that I think is the least bad out of all of them. Throughout the years, many plastic figurines featuring a number of famous video game characters known as amiibo have been released by Nintendo. Most commonly used simply as collectibles, each amiibo also has its own functionality when tapped in via an NFC connection in select games. For example, you can scan most of your amiibo in Breath of the Wild to receive some useful items, and for some specific amiibo you can actually get exclusive armor sets and weapons. However, quite a few of these amiibo have functionality inside games that many people think may be pushing the boundaries of fun little extras a bit too far. First off, I want to mention a category of amiibo I like to call quality of life gates. These select few figures are your key to a literal quality of life feature within a game, and also will save you a ton of time on unnecessary waiting and backtracking. Let's take an extra side mode of the Switch port of Super Mario 3D World, Bowser's Fury, for example. In this small adventure, Bowser has grown to a massive size and also sports a new, more threatening look. Around every 5 minutes during gameplay in this mode, he will awaken and wreak havoc across the entire map trying to take out Mario. Only during this time are some of the game's main collectibles, cat shines, available for the player to collect, as Bowser has to destroy a special kind of block known as Fury blocks in order to reveal the collectible hidden behind them. You're probably beginning to see the problem here. If the player's only remaining cat shine to collect for a certain area is the Fury block one, then they are quite literally stuck standing around until Fury Bowser reappears. Up to 5 whole minutes, as I said. But all of this is easily solved if you happen to have any Bowser amiibo on you. Scan any one of these at any time and Fury Bowser will appear instantly. You get to entirely skip the tedium of waiting around for him to appear just because you paid extra money for a glorified piece of plastic with the same technology used to contactless pay with your credit card.
Oh, hold up there, bud. You got your amiibo? No. Go ahead and stand over there for me.
What the? I have money.
No talking. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Possibly an even more controversial example of a quality of life gate amiibo is the Zelda and Loftwing amiibo released at the same time as Skyward Sword HD. For context, in the original version of Skyward Sword on the Wii, the only way to return to the sky once you reached the surface was to find an orange bird statue and get sent up from there. However, an amiibo functionality with the Zelda and Loftwing amiibo has been added in the HD version that allows you to return to the sky at any time, no matter where you are, even inside of a dungeon. There are many reasons that a player may want to return to the sky while playing, such as upgrading their gear, opening goddess chests, or turning in a side quest for the reward, and this amiibo cuts down on the backtracking needed to get back up there significantly, especially inside of dungeons since you'd have to go outside the dungeon in order to even find a bird statue that will actually send you back up to the sky. Even further, once you've teleported up into the sky, you can scan the amiibo a second time and return back to the exact same spot you originally came from. I should also mention that the Zelda and Loftwing amiibo in specific cost nearly $10 more than the large majority of other amiibo. Essentially, Nintendo locked fast travel, a feature that would have been great in the original game but makes even more sense now with the remake, behind an extra purchase totaling nearly half the game's value. I personally would have been much less apprehensive against this amiibo's functionality if it wasn't able to be used inside of dungeons. Outside of dungeons, a bird statue to return to the sky usually isn't that far away, but the fact that this amiibo, and this amiibo only, will allow the player to circumvent a large majority of the game's annoying and tedious backtracking just seems a bit scummy to me. And to rub salt into the Skyward Sword HD wound, when Twilight Princess HD launched on the Wii U back in 2016, it also launched at the standard price of $59.99 USD, and also included amiibo functionality that unlocked an entire extra dungeon within the game centered around Wolf-Link. But don't get angry about this one just yet. Included in the $59.99 price tag was the exact amiibo you needed to access the extra dungeon. And if you didn't care about getting access to this content, you could just buy the game by itself for $10 less. Say what you will about the true dollar value of HD remasters, because I don't even want to begin to try to take on that argument objectively, but I really feel like Twilight Princess HD's route of implementing extra features via amiibo functionality is a much better way of going about things in terms of the consumer's best interest. A number of other amiibo offer up assistance to struggling players through power-ups, health restores, etc., and this is probably the most common use of the figures themselves. As a concept, I think that this is fine and frankly a pretty good use of amiibo, but in some cases I believe the assistance goes a little too far to justify only being part of the amiibo. Let me explain. One of the collectibles in Super Mario Odyssey is the purple coins, officially known as regional coins. There are a certain number of them in each kingdom scattered around for the player to find, and can be used to purchase specific outfits that are required to obtain certain moons, as well as decorations for the Odyssey. In the base game, there is no way to find these coins other than to simply scour the kingdom and locate them yourself. If you get stuck, there is no way to receive any hints as to their location if you obviously are not getting the locations from an external source. Throughout the entire game, this is always the case, unless you happen to have any of the Bowser amiibo. Just scan one of those and you'll immediately be given the location of a set of regional coins in the form of a big purple glowing circle. This is just yet another amiibo that saves you from the tedium if you don't feel like doing something, and I could sit here and give even more examples of extra content and features being locked behind amiibo, but I'm sure you get the point. With this specific example of Mario Odyssey, since we're luckily in the age of the internet, this obviously isn't that big of a deal since you could just look up the locations online. But some people don't like receiving outside help in games and prefer to complete them themselves. Plus, you could even consider having to search up the regional coin locations as a form of tedium as well. To me at least, it's just not fun and wastes time that didn't need to be wasted. After all, games are supposed to be fun all the time, right? Do you remember the Wii U? Me neither, but it exists, and it was actually a pretty good console with some really good games. So good in fact that a large majority of them got ported over to the Switch. Jokes aside, the Wii U's relative commercial failure consequently caused many games to sell significantly less copies than if they were released on a more popular console. In turn, Nintendo thought many of these games were worth showing to new audiences and got ported over to the Switch with a few extra features. Games like New Super Mario Bros. U, Mario Kart 8, which is actually the best-selling game on the Switch by a long shot, Hyrule Warriors, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, Super Mario 3D World, Pikmin 3, and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze were all put on the Switch and saw much better success with their ports over their original releases. In the case of Tropical Freeze and Pikmin 3 though, Nintendo did something that literally could be considered as anti-consumer. After these games were released on the Switch, their original listings on the Wii U eShop were removed from the storefront entirely, meaning you couldn't buy the game anymore, well, at least not on the Wii U. It was obvious that these games were delisted in order to drive sales for the Switch ports. These ports were both sold at a $60 price tag, while both of the listings on the Wii U eShop sold only for $20. It almost seems like they were actually scared that people would go buy the cheaper version of the games instead, which is especially odd in the case of Pikmin because that game included an entirely new extra side campaign in its port. Tropical Freeze at least makes a little bit of sense, since that port only included an extra mode that made the game significantly easier. However, that doesn't make either of the instances acceptable in my opinion. If people want to buy the games on the Wii U, a console that isn't even being supported by Nintendo anymore, then they should be able to do so. Besides, in buying the Switch port, they are also paying for the fact that it is on a current generation console and that it will be portable, on top of the extra features in the ports themselves. I am not necessarily saying these games were worth $60, I am only saying it makes sense that they would be more than their Wii U counterparts because in terms of being on the Switch, they aren't old games yet. Luckily, Pikmin 3 was relisted on the eShop after mass amounts of backlash from fans, but unfortunately Tropical Freeze is still nowhere to be found digitally other than the Switch nowadays.
Thanks, Hank. I'm here on the scene of Dr. Chap's alleged kidnapping, where police are diligently inspecting all that can be inspected. Oh, that looks like one of the...
What is so funny out there? Check it out. We're on the news! Yeah, I heard, and why are you happy about that?
Have you seen this Hank guy? He looks so stupid.
Why is that what you're focused on when they literally mention you as a suspect in the investigation?
Yeah, I'm not worried. There is no way in hell they're finding you.
How can you be so sure?
Don't get snarky with me or you'll lose your food tomorrow too.
Oh no, not my singular saltine cracker.
I could starve you to death and you still want to be a smartass.
But you won't.
Oh yeah? And what makes you say that?
If you really wanted me dead, you would have killed me already.
There's some other reason I'm here. You're just not telling me.
Nope, no other reason. I just really don't like you, and I enjoy seeing you hopelessly stuck in a shed. Now, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go not iron my shirt.
I've made it clear time and time again that Nintendo is very protective of every last one of their intellectual properties, and the lengths they've gone to in order to keep a firm grasp on them have been slightly unnecessary to say the least. What I want to talk about this time though is their stance on the uploading of music tracks from any of their games to the internet. The internet as a whole has a sort of universal love for Nintendo music, and for good reason. They've created some of the most iconic tracks in video game history. Consequently, plenty of people have uploaded these tracks to YouTube for everyone to enjoy, with some channels even being entirely dedicated to creating themed compilations of songs from all of these great games. However, as you may have guessed, Nintendo does not like this. Every few months or so, we see a mass takedown of plenty of Nintendo tracks and compilations off of YouTube due to, obviously, copyright infringement. I'd first off like to acknowledge that, yes, Nintendo is technically within their legal right to do this. I am entirely aware of that, but here's the thing. All of these creators that are uploading these tracks are also fully aware that they don't own the copyright to any of them, so they intentionally and deliberately make sure that they are not receiving any monetary gain directly from the videos themselves. None of the videos have advertisements, the creators do not have paid memberships enabled, nothing. The only thing that a few of the creators have are either a Patreon or a Ko-fi link, asking for your support in the organization of the compilations of music themselves, not in the uploading of copyrighted material. Keep in mind that most of them also don't exclusively upload Nintendo compilations either, and most other games companies allow creators to use and upload their music with monetization. Even worse is the fact that Nintendo has failed to make a very large portion of their music available for streaming or purchase anywhere legally themselves, yet they still get angry and take down anyone who decides to do exactly what they are failing to do. Like I said, not all of Nintendo's music is completely inaccessible legally, but putting all of their tracks on streaming platforms like Spotify or Apple Music, as well as uploading them to YouTube could 1. Make them tons of money, and 2. Keep most people from uploading the tracks themselves, since that's such a huge problem to them apparently. This is one of the few things that Nintendo has done that I genuinely cannot even begin to rationalize. If you aren't offering the product or service yourself, people are going to figure out a way to obtain it through other means. It does not mean that they want to break the law and commit numerous instances of copyright infringement. They just enjoy what you make and want a way to experience it. This seems to be a common theme with Nintendo when it comes to copyright law and intellectual properties. All of the quote-unquote problems that they have with people obtaining their copyrighted material through alternative means could easily be solved by simply offering the products themselves. Not to mention make them a lot of money, like I already said. Since they are a business, it's also important to look at things from a business perspective.
If we take a look at our sales projections here, it looks like if we put our soundtracks on streaming services, the amount of money we make will go up. Alright. This guy is making 0 f***ing sense to me.
But that's not the only time Nintendo has gotten irrationally angry at fans for doing something seemingly harmless to both the intellectual property and brand as a whole. Welcome to the world of competitive Nintendo games, mostly consisting of Super Smash Bros., but some other games are in the mix too. The relationship with Nintendo and the competitive scene has been rocky to say the least. They've even gone on record stating that none of the Smash games are even intended to be played competitively, essentially indirectly displaying their dismay towards any competitions based around the games they make in general. In turn, a very small amount of competitions have actually been officially sponsored by Nintendo, and even the ones that were usually had their fair share of issues as well. To be clear though, if Nintendo doesn't want to support the competitive scene monetarily, that is completely fine and entirely their choice. However, the least they could do was respect the fact that people do want to play their games competitively. Why does it matter if you didn't intend the game to be played that way? People can play games however the hell they want.
No! Who does this guy think he is?
Back in November of 2020, an online competition for Super Smash Bros. Melee was planned and going to be hosted by a long-running, well-respected, and community-funded Smash tournament known as the Big House. Due to, well, certain events that were happening at the time, they were not able to hold the competition in person as usual. Instead, they opted to utilize a custom mod for Smash Melee known as Slippy that enabled for online play. This mod was entirely legal to use as long as the player had legally obtained their copy of the game that they were using with the mod, which, to be honest, was most likely the case for every single one of the players involved in the tournament. They are professionals after all. Obviously, anyone who is planning to compete at a high-level tournament for Smash Melee is going to own a copy of Smash Melee. However, in Nintendo's statement to the press after the initial cease and desist was sent to the Big House, they decided to still try and play the card that competitors were using illegally obtained copies of the game. After all of this came to light, it was only a matter of time before the community caught wind and got really angry, and for good reason. This competition was entirely legal as long as the copies of the game were ripped from the players' own copies of the game, which I'm sure the Big House made clear in the rules and regulations. Shortly after the announcement from the Big House about the cease and desist though, the hashtags Free Melee and Save Smash started trending all around the internet, with fans outraged at Nintendo's decision to shut down the tournament. After all, an in-person tournament was essentially impossible at the time, so the least Nintendo could have done was understand that and give the slightest bit of leeway to allow the tournament to commence just that one time, but sadly, it didn't happen. Amidst all this chaos, a Splatoon 2 tournament was planned to be hosted by Nintendo within the coming weeks after the original Big House announcement. In support of the Smash community, many of the top teams competing in the tournament used team names mentioning hashtag Free Melee in some way. Presumably for this exact reason, Nintendo cancelled and banned any and all live streams of the finals event in the tournament, essentially spitting in the face of anyone who chose to stand in solidarity for the unfair treatment of the Smash community. I guess the only phrase I could use toward Nintendo in both the Big House shutdown and Splatoon tournament is out of touch. After all, I can only assume the large majority of the corporate or law sectors of the company are run by some old dudes, most of whom don't have much experience with gaming in the first place, so why should they be trusted with a company expected to make choices in the best interest of their consumers, which all happen to be gamers themselves? It just doesn't make sense. Their views on so many things from copyright law to competitive esports are frankly outdated, and I wish some way, somehow we could get through to them and tell them that they don't have to be like this anymore. Ever since the Switch's release and massive commercial success, I've noticed Nintendo begin to go down a much darker path than they ever have in the past. Why is this? Well, you can blame many things like executive changes, different ideologies, etc., and all of those are contributors as well, but the main reason Nintendo feels they can be a little more scummy nowadays is money. The Nintendo Switch and its games have made Nintendo an unfathomable amount of money over the course of their lifetimes. Much more than the Wii U did, and because they know that most people will throw their money at just about everything they release, and some will even defend the company for their shitty actions that step all over the consumers that love their products so much, it's frankly embarrassing. For the record, I am fully aware that some of the things I've mentioned today are much less of a big deal than others, but does that completely invalidate them as a concern? I don't think so. Say what you will about each specific scenario, but in my opinion, all these decisions are doing is pushing your loyal fans away. I'll leave you with this thought. In order to run a successful company with longevity based primarily on gaming, you have to be a gamer yourself, inside and out. Without that, it's only a matter of time before you screw up too badly and it all comes crumbling down.
Holy shit. Good evening and... God damn it, Eric! Good evening and welcome to Channel 12.5 News. I'm your host, Hank R. Man. Let's get right into tonight's stories. The examination of the crime scene for Dr. Edward Chapps' alleged kidnapping has concluded. Officers are still unable to pinpoint where he was allegedly taken, but a few pieces of evidence were found. First being this slip of paper addressed to Chapps' secretary lying in the parking lot of the therapist's office. Police say this could be indicative of the patient's mental state. In addition, a
Mental
document about the
state.
effects of
Okay,
brain
then.
beings on the human brain was open on his laptop. Why are we showing this? And you wonder why we get put on a half channel. If this evidence rings a bell for anyone viewing tonight's broadcast, we once again urge you to please contact the local authorities through the number on your screen as soon as possible. With that said though, let's now kick it over to Darcy for a more lighthearted story. Thanks, Hank. I'm here on someone's back porch without their permission trying to... Oh, aha! You're here! What's wrong? Did you get kidnapped or something? What the hell is this, huh? Couldn't you have figured that out yourself? You'd think a therapist would know how to read. Who knew you were stupid enough to leave incriminating documents in the same room as me? A whole box of them, in fact. Yeah. That is pretty stupid, isn't it? Not only are you targeting proponents of emulation, but you're also targeting fan game creators, all about fabricating their deaths? You are a funny guy, you know that? I don't see anything funny about this. I just thought it would be amusing if you read through all those documents. Why the hell else would I hide the box above 2 loose boards in the ceiling other than wanting you to find it? It's honestly embarrassing how long it took you. It doesn't matter how long it took me. You're kidnapping people and holding them captive just for making a game. We all know it's not that simple. Stop sugarcoating it. You need to know that your actions have consequences, just like with all of these other people. Besides, we haven't even spoken about fan games yet. We didn't get to that in our stupid little sessions, but I guess it's clear where your intentions lie. So where are all these other people you've taken? What are you doing to them? Are they even alive? Whoa, slow down there, Shed Boy. That's for me to know and for you to be angry about. Are you kidding me? Shed Boy? Anyways, I think I'm gonna head out. Here's your daily saltine. Also, why don't you take a shower? It smells like shit in here.
Fan games. There's a lot of them, especially when we're talking about Nintendo, and obviously if you're even the slightest bit involved within the Nintendo sphere, you've heard about how they deal with them. In fact, there's so much infamy surrounding Nintendo fan games that whenever you mention it, you're sure to have at least one person spew out their hive mind opinion about the subject.
Nintendo hates their fans. They're always sicking their lawyers on people that make games purely out of love for their franchises. I honestly cannot think of a single corporation on this planet that has done something worse than that.
So, does that mean you don't want pepperoni on your pizza? It's not that this isn't true to an extent, because it definitely is, but it's honestly far more complicated than you would think. What if I told you that Nintendo only takes down certain fan games and essentially ignores the others? That's right, the games that most people think are flying under the radar are actually, at least from what most people have gathered, not a problem to Nintendo. Let me explain. DMCA, or the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, is a law created back in the Stone Age of the Internet, 1998. Basically, in the context of digital media, it means that copyright holders reserve the right to send a legal cease and desist order to anyone infringing on their copyrighted material, whether that be video, music, writing, or games. I'm not gonna bore you with the details. Besides, let's be honest, how many people actually seem to really care about digital property laws anyway? This is obviously relevant to fan games, as there have been numerous instances of public outrage due to a really promising fan game getting shut down by the evil corporate overlords. And sure, it makes complete sense to be a little angry that something you were excited to play gets eviscerated. The same has happened to me plenty of times. However, I think it's important to understand why these specific games get shut down, and no, it's not just because they're infringing on copyright. There are actually 3 different criteria I've discovered that seem to put a fan game at the highest risk of a DMCA takedown. Fulfilling any of these usually, but not always, guarantees a nice little letter from the offices at Nintendo. Before I start though, keep in mind that none of these criteria apply to the Pokemon franchise, as any takedowns of those games are handled by the Pokemon Company, which is a completely different breed of whackjob corporation. So, the first criteria available to piss off Nintendo is if the fan game you are creating is a remake of an already existing Nintendo game. One of the most notable examples of this is AM2R, or another Metroid 2 remake. As subtle as that title is, Nintendo caught on pretty quickly, issuing the takedown less than a month after its release. A year after that, Samus Returns releases for the 3DS, which was also a remake of Metroid 2. You can probably see the reasoning here. As crazy as it sounds, their thought process assumed that AM2R would hinder the sales of Samus Returns. Honestly, in this case, it possibly could have, considering that AM2R is widely regarded as the better remake of the two in most aspects, but that's besides the point. Why is it besides the point? Well, because they obviously don't take remakes down just because they're making their own at the same time. They might remake that game in 20 years, and God forbid that we enjoy an alternative beforehand. Back in 2015, a fan remade the first level of Super Mario 64 from the ground up as a demonstration for their custom character controller in the Unity engine. They published a YouTube video showing this off. Shortly after the video was released, particularly when it started gaining mass media attention, an attorney contacted the creator on behalf of Nintendo and casted their magic annoying legal word spell to scare them away. It worked, obviously, and that was that. I gave this example on top of the other because, well, Nintendo never actually remade Super Mario 64 after this was taken down, unless they were already planning this, or they were trying to protect sales of the DS remake, which is on a discontinued console that they can't really profit off of anymore. I mean, if you really wanted to be completely fair, this was shortly before that remake released on the Wii U Virtual Console, but like, come on.
I mean, what are the shareholders gonna think when they see that someone's programming exercise has Mario in it? Oh god, oh f***. This can't be happening. Tell Janet to call the attorney right now!
Granted, you can still find both of these games in plenty of places across the internet if you just look, but for legal reasons I am only acknowledging this, not encouraging it. AM2R was actually picked back up by fans of the game, and since then has received multiple updates bringing bug fixes, improvements, and even a couple new game modes. As you may have guessed though, the Super Mario 64 remake never saw any further progress after its initial takedown, but there are plenty of other remakes of the game out there started, but usually never finished, by countless fans.
Nintendo, hire this man now.
The next cardinal sin that will summon the DMCA overlords is probably the most obvious, and that is monetization. I don't think many people actually disagree with the reasoning behind this one. If you're directly profiting off the use of an intellectual property that you don't own, it's a bit more understandable. However, you're still going to have those people that only think fan game takedown bad and still get pissed anyway. Learn to think with a little nuance, people. Anyways, this monetization criteria is the reason for one of the biggest DMCA takedowns in Nintendo history. Back in 2020, GameJolt, a popular indie game hosting site, received a DMCA takedown notice from Nintendo citing 379 Nintendo fan games that were to be taken down immediately. Why? Well, GameJolt has a feature in which the developers receive a small fraction of the ad revenue generated from their game's page. And when I say small fraction, I really mean a small fraction. Most developers report making $1 to $2 per year from these pages. Regardless, revenue is revenue, and Nintendo did not like that people were able to buy a 2-liter from the gas station once a year with their prosperous earnings. Other fan game creators have received takedown notices due to either having ads on the site hosting the download or asking for donations via something like PayPal or Patreon to aid in development. If you ask me, applying any form of monetization to any fan game, regardless of if it's Nintendo or not, is just a bad idea from the start. If you can't afford to make a game and need financial assistance from people wanting to see the game developed, then just don't make a fan game. Make something original and you have all the right in the world to ask for as much money as you want. That statement begs the big question though. Why do people choose to make fan games over their own original work? Well, the obvious answer is that fan games are created out of love for the franchises they are based on. People simply like to have more of what they enjoy. It allows them to stay in their comfort zone, both in the case of developers and players. Developers get to work with and refine familiar concepts, artwork, and mechanics, while the players get to experience them. Though, even under this umbrella, they always have the right to simply take heavy inspiration from these titles while still creating their own original properties instead, which is why I do think it's worth acknowledging that in most cases, these games wouldn't be getting nearly as much attention if they didn't include Nintendo's intellectual properties. That may seem like a given, but I also feel like it's something that not many people talk or even think about in the context of this conversation. At any rate, I want to make it clear that this is not meant to discredit these creators in any way. There have been plenty of fan games that actually end up being better than most of the official releases. After all, one of the most common motivations for making these games is succeeding where the actual developers failed. There is a company that is completely in support of literally just hiring people willing to do exactly that, and I'm sure you can guess who, but just hold on, we're getting there. The final characteristic of a fan game that makes Nintendo shit their diapers is if you happen to depict any of their properties in an inappropriate manner. So if you were thinking of making a Wario sex game, you're pretty much out of luck. Obviously, it's not just sexual content that counts as inappropriate though. For example, any games that depict gruesome violence or vulgar language involving Nintendo IPs have been known to receive takedowns almost immediately. I'm sure many of us remember those Mario Flash games from back in the day where he and many other Mario characters committed countless violent acts against others. You know, the good old days. That being said, it is worth mentioning that this final criteria isn't nearly as reliable as the first two in whether or not your game is going to be taken down. More often than not, Nintendo doesn't bother with these, but it was still common enough to bring up. However, as with all things, there are a couple exceptions to those first two criteria, meaning games outside the bounds of them were taken down anyway, with one of the most notable cases being The Legend of Zelda: The Missing Link, an entirely original ROM hack created to bridge the gap in story between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Mere months after its release, Nintendo did its thing and The Missing Link suffered the same fate as many others, but something is different about this fan game in specific that makes the takedown even more confusing. As I already mentioned, The Missing Link is a ROM hack of Ocarina of Time. For those who aren't familiar, ROM hacks are essentially modified copies of the original game that can range from changing a few lines of text to creating an entirely new game. This is another way of creating fan games, which is usually more accessible than building your own from the ground up, and makes it even less likely that Nintendo will come for your head. But as you can see here, your odds will never be zero.
So you're telling me you paid the lawyers that Much to take down a measly ROM hack? Look, man, that part isn't important. Just cut me a little slack here. I was really drunk. Unbelievable! Did you get a look at his face, though?
Like when I handed him the cease and desist letter?
Yeah, he started crying. No way!
As far as anyone knows, ROM hacks are entirely legal to create and distribute as long as you do two things. First, don't profit off of them, if that wasn't already obvious, and second, make sure you only distribute the patch of the ROM and not the ROM itself, the ROM being the copy of the actual game. Distributing any portion of that yourself is entirely illegal, no gray area there. By distributing the patch and the patch only, you're giving people the ability to modify their own, presumably legally obtained copy of the game with your patch when they apply it to their ROM. So why does Nintendo get to issue takedowns on these anyway? Well, the short answer is that they have more money than you. Even though you are technically within your legal right to create and release these patches, as far as I can tell at least, Nintendo knows that you can't afford the avalanche of legal fees that will come your way if you try to fight them in court about it. That may sound extremely scummy. That's because it is. For the most part, it seems like they ignore ROM hacks, but I guess if they don't like one enough, they can use their mountainous legal budget to get it to go away one way or another. But alas, all of their efforts are in vain regardless. As soon as that patch hits the World Wide Web, there is absolutely no possible way it's disappearing forever. For example, you can still find the missing link with a simple Google search, and I can tell you this because it's legal. All Nintendo can really do is prevent the original creator from hosting, supporting, or developing the game any further, and even that's only through financial scare tactics. Another pretty big exception to the remake criteria comes with Super Mario Bros. X. However, this time it's the reverse. It has never been officially shut down and has existed for over a decade. This fan game is actually a powerful engine used to create custom Mario levels and games, or at this point any type of platformer. Since its release in 2009, it has only had one run-in with Nintendo because someone was dumb enough to use the domain name supermariobrothers.org for the game and put ads on the site. Long story short, Nintendo essentially took the domain and told them to stop putting ads on the site, and that was the end of it. A cease and desist was involved, but it seemed to only really apply to the website itself, which was also hosting numerous other Mario-related things at that time. The game still receives support and updates to this day, though the development team changed after the original run-in with Nintendo, and that's a whole other story. What makes this game such an anomaly, as well as the numerous other Mario level editors, is the fact that it's essentially just a more powerful version of Mario Maker. You'd think Nintendo would be all over this, sending that letter the first chance they got, but they haven't yet, even after the release of 2 Mario Maker games in the meantime. In reality, I guess this reinforces the remake criteria pretty literally. This game is not a remake of Mario Maker, in fact it came out before it. So even though it technically is directly competing with the game because they share what is essentially the same functionality, making and sharing levels, it doesn't exactly matter. Regardless, hopefully it never gets taken down. I should probably knock on some wood now, shouldn't I? Just like ROM hacks, fan games in general aren't targeted as often as people think. They really don't seem to go after that many in the grand scheme of things, but any within the criteria I mentioned are at much greater risk. The common misconception is that they go after everything they can find, but that's simply not true. It's not pure coincidence that they almost always exclusively stay within this specific criteria. Now, does this mean I think they should have taken down a lot of these games? Not really. There are some I agree with, but most of them it's just like, come on. You seriously thought that posed a threat against this? Sure, you could take the slippery slope approach and say that if they let one thing slide, where do they stop letting things slide? Where is the line drawn? My guess is that that's their ideology with this. Or they're just stingy old corporate men in suits that are so completely out of touch with the world that they couldn't even tell you how much a gallon of milk costs. You know, either one works.
I only drink oat milk, and it's not even because of my bowels. Now what could that be? I have no wife or kids and a lot of money. Hey, there's the cash I refused to tip the waitress earlier.
Good evening and welcome to Channel 12.5 News. I'm your host, Hank R. Mann. Let's get right into tonight's stories. In a shocking turn of events, police have reported the death of local renowned therapist Dr. Edward Chapps. Detectives found his car submerged in the Diabetes River late last night. There is visible damage to the bridge over the water where the car presumably collided, but officers are still gathering more information.
You want me to read this? Okay. At this time, we cannot disclose much as this still remains an ongoing investigation, though I can confirm that Dr. Chapps was dead on arrival. We ask that the public remain calm as this seems to have been an accident exclusively at the driver's fault. We await autopsy. What the hell is that? Autopsy results to better understand the victim's physical and mental state at the time of the accident. Thank you. Was that good?
In other news, Darcy James, a beloved member of our field crew, was unfortunately hospitalized yesterday evening due to an injury sustained while out in the field. A shattered tailbone to be specific. That's what she gets for showing up to my pickleball game with a shirt that says, "I heart Hank's pickle and balls." Anyways, that's it for tonight, folks. From all of us here at Channel 12.5 News, thank you for watching. And as always, I'll leave you with this. We may not be the best news source, but we definitely exist. Have a good one.
Did you see that?
Let's take a familiar step away from Nintendo and look at one specific company with a drastically different approach to fan games. If you remember from when I talked about emulation, Sega is known pretty well for having an extremely relaxed attitude toward the practice, at least in comparison to other companies, and Nintendo especially. With fan games, it's largely the same story. Representatives of the company have explicitly gone on record saying that as long as you aren't profiting, feel free to do with our properties as you will. The game I'm referencing today, which is probably a familiar story to many, actually took it quite a few steps further than that. Let me explain. So, if you've known anything about Sega over the past decade and a half or so, you would be aware that they, to put it short, have made some bad games. In turn, fans got pretty tired of it and decided to pick up the slack themselves. Relevant to this situation is Sonic Mania, a game produced as a result of prominent Sonic fan game and ROM hack creators being hired by Sega to work with them on the title. This is how I imagine that hiring process went.
Hey, we kind of suck ass. Can you help us?
Sonic Mania was a sort of return to form for the Sonic series, paying homage to the original Genesis titles in both gameplay and aesthetics. Like I said, much of the team was composed of people from the fan content community, which was entirely unprecedented in the industry, and still is to this day, but this decision by Sega would definitely prove to be a good one. The lead developer of Sonic Mania, Christian Whitehead, actually worked with Sega before this when he was contracted to develop enhanced mobile ports of the Genesis Sonic games. Shortly after these ports were finished, Christian presented a playable prototype of what would become Sonic Mania to Sonic Team producer Takashi Iizuka. Development commenced shortly after this, and well, the rest is history. In August of 2017, Sonic Mania released and became the highest rated Sonic game in 15 years. Now, you could say that the hiring of these fan game creators came from a place of desperation, and in some ways it probably did. Sega missed the mark game after game for years, and at that point they could have just been extremely discouraged and willing to do anything. You definitely could take that route in this conversation. However, whether that was the case or not, I really don't think there's any shame in doing it, and most people would probably agree with me. Regardless, I think it's safe to say that Nintendo themselves are by no means in a place of desperation. remember this big boy number? Their stuff still sells extremely well. It doesn't matter if it's horse or not, but they could still benefit greatly from taking the same approach as Sega. There is so much talent out there that isn't directly associated with an official studio, and many of them don't have the ability to do so even if they wanted to. Why let all of that go to waste? As far as I'm concerned, it should be common practice to search for talent via the fan community for every company. You're pulling from a huge pool of passion, knowledge, and drive for what you do, specifically Nintendo. I'm not sure if your ego is too big to grasp this or something, but sometimes it doesn't have to be as simple as the by-the-books definition of copyright infringement, especially if monetization isn't involved. Why not consider using your unbelievably passionate fans to your advantage? If they're willing to dedicate hundreds or even thousands of hours of their life solely to making games based on your properties and solely out of pure love for the franchises, what kind of stuff do you think they could produce if you actually paid them for it? Isn't that at least a little bit flattering?
So loosen up and actually give these people a chance. I highly doubt you'll regret it in the long run.
Fan games aren't the only thing Nintendo has gone after in the past though. Fan-made content in general is something with a pretty rough history when it comes to this company. What do I mean by fan-made content though? Well, in this case I'm mostly referring to any form of video creation relating to Nintendo games or products, specifically on YouTube. Let's travel back to the dark year of 2015, where the Wii U was on life support and Nintendo's knowledge of how the internet worked was even worse than it is now. Ever since the rise in popularity of being a YouTuber happened a few years prior to 2015, Nintendo started cracking down on literally any content featuring their games on the platform, mostly through placing ads on these videos and then claiming all of the revenue, regardless of the subject matter. Though videos of ROM hacks and speedrunning were especially targeted and taken even further than that, with many just being taken off the platform entirely, especially if the video was monetized. Now, this all may sound absurd, but remember, we're talking about old, wrinkly, out-of-touch corporate men here. Do you really think they even understood the concept of YouTube back then, let alone now? I know this all too well. I used to work at a phone store and dealt with these elderly folks every day.
No, sir. This app came preloaded on the phone. I can't take it off. But I already have a calendar at home. I don't need this one.
All these guys saw was the use of their intellectual property on the internet, and that was enough for them. At the time, they failed to see the numerous benefits that came from users posting and sharing their content in this manner, and in some ways they still do. In addition, like I've already hinted at, monetization was also quite an issue with Nintendo content during this time. This is why you really didn't see any prominent content creators even touching Nintendo's games from around 2013 to 2015. Up until that point, this was basically the treatment that Nintendo content got. Once 2015 did hit though, something arguably even worse emerged. Say hello to the Nintendo Creators Program, or as I like to call it, corporate dystopia. This program was Nintendo's quote-unquote solution to the backlash towards their numerous takedowns and demonetizations of these videos. If you opted to sign up for this program, you were able to monetize your videos featuring Nintendo content, but there's a catch. Anyone in this program would lose 30% of their ad revenue to Nintendo on any video featuring their properties, and keep in mind that this was on top of YouTube's cut, which is usually around 45%, give or take. So basically, to put it lightly, you were getting f***ed. But that wasn't enough for Nintendo. To add even more fuel to the hate fire for them, they made it a requirement that every Nintendo video uploaded to a channel within this program had to be manually approved before being monetized. If they didn't like what you showed, did, or said in your Nintendo video, they reserved the full right to just claim the entire thing. If you didn't comply, you would be removed from the program and miss out on all that potential ad revenue, that whole 25% cut of it.
So, how many 2 liters does this get me?
Some may try to bring up the argument that a lot of the videos claimed and removed by Nintendo fell under the protection of fair use laws. However, this isn't really true. In most cases, it just comes down to saying it depends. From what I found, permission for creators to publish, say, Let's Plays for example, is often at the copyright holder's discretion. Their terms of service often expresses what type of content is permissible, and often there's even a clause that allows them to revoke permission at any time. Even if it was the case that it fell under fair use law, since the creator essentially signed an agreement with Nintendo when they were accepted into the program, they're at the mercy of the company now. How all this legal stuff actually works is beyond me, so I apologize if some of that was inaccurate. I did the best I could, but as far as I know, this is how they managed to get away with their behavior. When it comes down to it, all this does is exemplify how copyright law in general is so easily abused and manipulated by these corporations, just like with any legal matter. If they don't like it, they'll find a way to get rid of it, no matter how many loopholes they have to jump through. Unfortunately, I would be doing a disservice claiming that their takedowns and revenue snatching were unequivocally illegal. Luckily, after extreme amounts of backlash towards the program, in 2018 it was shelved and Nintendo eased off the totalitarianism quite considerably. Obviously, there's still the issues with the music that they refuse to make available anywhere, among other things, but you can now make videos about their stuff without them having an accident in their pants about it. But, you know, it's never going to be perfect. At the end of the day though, moral dilemmas and angry gamers still don't hold a candle to copyright law. No matter how stupid you think I am, I can still acknowledge that. But before you try and sit here and tell me that Nintendo is only protecting their copyrights and that they would lose them otherwise, please take another look at my example about Sega, or in numerous other places in the gaming industry. Fan game creators' intentions are very rarely, if ever, to infringe upon copyright for their own personal gain. Regardless of all of that, I still found it important to clarify that Nintendo really isn't as cutthroat as the majority makes them out to be. Just abide by the criteria I mentioned and you'll most likely be completely fine. But I still wish they weren't so hands-off with the concept as a whole. It would be amazing to one day see them embrace the talents of these fan game creators. I think it could really lead to something special. Call it a pipe dream, call me crazy, tell me I need to seek serious mental help. Whichever way you put it, you're correct.
What?
I've decided to let you go. Your mother's in the hospital.
Oh my god! Thank you! Is she okay? Sit your dumb ass back down. What? Why? I'm not letting you go.
Your mom is in the hospital though.
What the? Can you at least tell me if she's doing alright?
She's doing as alright as someone in critical condition in the hospital can be doing. Oh, that's a big spider.
You know what? You.
Whoa, big man! Must have forgotten I control your food supply.
Just leave me alone. I don't even care anymore.
Oh, okay. I'll respect the wishes of my
Hostage.
He left it unlocked.
Chamber number 0237, housing Dr. Edward Chapss, has been deinitialized.
What the hell is this place? Coming at you live in hologram form, it's Mr. Nintendo. You may now piss your pants in disbelief. Of course it's you again. How's the shed life treating you, Dr. Chapss? I see you never took my advice and showered. Turn off my smell transmission, please.
Smell transmission disabled.
Thank you. So how you holding up, buddy? Should have just stayed in the damn shed. Anyways, welcome to my augmented reality chamber. What do you think? I think you're f***ed in the head. Everything you've known for the past several weeks, entirely fabricated. All the way down to the beads of sweat on that big-ass forehead of yours. All this over a disagreement about video games. I wasn't even doing any of the stuff you were so angry about. But that doesn't matter, does it? You were in support of my opposition. And you're a therapist. You have, how do I say it, an inherent influence on people. I couldn't have that message spreading around any more than it already is. So, here we are. What is wrong with you? Great question. Let's go back to the beginning, shall we? You know, my father was always a strict man. What? Throughout my entire upbringing, he preached to me the importance of copyright law. Every Sunday, we would wake up extra early to go to the copyright chapel and learn the ins and outs of the craft. And while at the time I despised the man for forcing me into this lifestyle, sometimes through physical coercion, I slowly grew to realize the value of the magnificent legislature our country had created. My father passed away when I was only 17 years old. If only he wouldn't have spent so much time studying copyright law, he might have known that you're not supposed to chew and swallow cigarettes. You light them and smoke them. He wasn't the most intelligent man, but he sure was my father. You know what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I didn't ask you to speak! Fast forward a few years, I go through law school, I get a job at Nintendo, yada yada yada, not really important. But one day, my schedule is handed to me by my secretary, as per usual. But one thing seems fishy, and I'm not talking about the tuna her dumbass spilt on it. The schedule says I have a quote-unquote meeting with Dr. Edward Chapss. Now, I have no idea who you are at this point, but I think nothing of it and attend the meeting. And that's when the pudding hit the fan. Pudding? By what I can only consider an anomaly, you somehow modified my schedule to add these meetings in. And I missed my chiropractor appointments for 3 whole weeks because of it. Even worse is that these weren't meetings, they were therapy appointments disguised as meetings, attempting to bring me out of the great ways my father taught me so long ago. And as you may know, you continuously pissed me off for 3 entire sessions, of which I kept returning to because I can't control myself when it comes to following schedules. That is really weird. At that point, I had finally had it. I couldn't even get my lawyers involved because you got me to sign that stupid little waiver with your sweet talk. So instead, I went home and began to devise a plan to kidnap you. And it only took me 2 hours since you thought it was a good idea to leave the back door of your office just sitting open in the middle of the night. I threw a bag over your head, drugged you, threw you in my car, and, well, you probably remember the rest. All the way down to the last saltine. Anyways, I've been babbling for way too long. If anyone were to be, say, watching us have this conversation right now, they'd probably be pretty bored. Obviously, you've noticed that there are others in your same position. I'm giving each and every one of you an ultimatum. You either join my task force to stop emulation, fan games, and anything else I feel like purifying. Or you return to your shed illusion and live off saltines for the rest of your days. Do we get any time to decide? By all means, take as much time as you need. Just keep in mind that I will not be feeding you whatsoever until you make a decision. So, tick-tock.
Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yes? Who the hell are you?
That's not important. We're on the same side, okay? Now, we don't have much time, so listen up. I'm going to unlock the exit hatch in about 10 seconds. I don't know where it's located in the room, so you've got to find it. And fast. Mr. Nintendo is on his way back up here right now.
So you don't have any idea where it could be?
Yes, that's what I just said, dumbass. Stop asking questions and start looking. How the hell did you get out?
Oh, that sounds like a copyright lover.
Oh, God. It's been real, dude. Hatch is opening now. If you don't make it, well, I guess I'll see you on the other side.
You know too much now! It's your fault that I have to do this!
Oh, no! Oh, thank God!
Got another one. This just in, an autopsy report on the body found in the Diabetes River, presumed to be the missing Dr. Edward Chapps, turned out to be someone else entirely. Authorities are still hard at work identifying this individual. Chapps remains to be located. The Nintendo executive pinned as the prime suspect in the disappearance of Dr. Edward Chapps has been cleared of any and all charges, seemingly for no reason. He has since expressed his supposed condolences to Chapps and donated several $1 million to entirely unrelated charities. Chapps was an amazing therapist, helped me out of a really tough spot. That note I left his secretary was during one of my most severe episodes, and still he was understanding and worked through everything with me. It's just so sad to see that he still isn't home. I'm sorry. I can't.
So do you think it was worth it? You know, my brain's telling me to say, of course not. Look where you managed to land yourself. But I can't help but feel like I was maybe contributing to something bigger. I mean, we made it further than anyone else ever had. As far as I know, I was the first captive to gain access to that intercom. I guess. You're much more hopeful than I am. Yeah, that sounded corny anyway.